Welcome, I'm Cynthia Miller, and today we're going to do a bunny and flower. I've got the template on my paper here, and I am looking at the template from last year actually that we used for the classes this week. We've got a morning class and an afternoon class, and we start with the eye. We use the Payne's Gray, very small brush, about a 0 to 1, and leave a little white spot in the center. I usually use Payne's Gray for black or gray, and it's good old standby. But yeah, we're making some parts of the bunny look real, and other parts look imaginary with the colors and the sparkle. So we're just using a very light Quinacridone pink to paint the inside of the ears. This is just on the dry paper. And lots of water though, and we're putting a little bit of pink on the paws, and we're going over the lines here. We want to make it free. We're trying to free up our creativity here in this imaginary bunny, and just you'll see as it goes, it starts to make a little more sense. The pattern isn't exactly what I use now. It is something I just grabbed before a class this week and thought it was the right one, but it looks a little bit different than the one we did. But I did one in the morning. This is the morning one. And then I did one in the afternoon, which I like quite a bit better. So it sort of shows you that if you give it another go and sort of put what you love between the two pictures, the third one just might be the one that you love. So we've gone a little bit around the ears with brownish grays, and you can choose any color that you want for the paws and the ears. I just thought I would do those as you sometimes see the bunny. Here I did it more in a gray color, and here it's got a little bit more brown. Now I've wet the back of the bunny, and so the paper is quite wet, and I'm going to hold the board up so that the paint runs down, and this is how I add the color to the back. And in our template it's purple, and this is again more of a realistic color, and I thought that I would just add more realistic colors in with just little bits of imaginary pinks and purples and stuff like that. So we'll see where this takes us, and I'm really encouraging you to be playful with this, because it is a chance to do that when you have something that's a little bit magical, to make it magical. So of course this time of year we're thinking of bunnies in the fresh of spring, and just the idea that you might see little bunnies running around smelling the flowers. So this color is my burnt umber. It is quite a dark brown, but I did add some orange shades to it. I've got some colors in my palette that don't have names, so I'm not able to really share that, except it's a very deep orange. And I'm just showing you what I've done with the paws and the back. Basically, I've gone over top the lines, so it ends up looking a little bit fuzzy, which is kind of nice. And basically I'm just sort of, doing this in sections. So I'm doing the face now, and I'm just pointing out some white spots around the eyes, and just sort of leaving that shape of an eye a little bit more cat-like cat eye. And I've wet down the snout area of the bunny, and I'm just spreading some colors around. And I don't know, for me, I think having a warmer color like yellows or oranges, pinks are sort of nice for the nose. And I think the darker colors might look like a mask, but I really like the way that's looking just by, lifting it up and letting the colors run. You can sometimes get some really neat effects. And here I'm just adding some more color because I do like the brighter shades in this. And the page is still a little bit wet, so just adding more as I go, and doing a little bit more on the paws. Add a little bit to the feet after putting some water on there first. This is the same Payne's Gray that I used on the neck. And I'm just lifting up some color, giving a little bit more definition, adding a little bit more pink and mixing that in, and just playing with it. And I want to encourage you to play with this and just let the colors move and do what they want to do. And yeah, I'm doing the same with the little tail here, which in hindsight I think it's a little bit high, but that's okay. I moved it down a couple inches in the next one. And so just outlining the bunny ears again with the gray color, Payne's gray, and just sort of playing with the wetness of the page and how I can blend those two together. I want it to be sort of fuzzy because that's the texture that a bunny has, but I also want it to be sort of fun and colorful. So I'm just adding some water to the page on the neck area in between the sections that I've already got the color on. And it does bring the color together just a slight bit. And I'm going to put a different color in there. I just haven't decided what color yet. So now I'm just adding some more of that dark, deeper orange to the thigh, and the paper's wet, so it is blending in nicely. And what I'm looking at now is the color wheel to try to figure out what color I should bring into this. I know that the oranges are complemented by a really nice blue-green color, so that is a color I've decided to put in the chest area, and I've already wet that down, and I'm just putting brush strokes in the direction where the shape of the bunny is, and then I'm just going to take it on the side and start adding some more pigment in there. And so by those first brush strokes that I took, you'll see that the water sort of follows those brush strokes to give it some shape. Again, you know, trying to keep some realistic looks to the bunny while bringing in some magic. And so I'm just going to play around with the contours of the bunny now as I go along and spread things around, play with things a little bit. I've got one section of the forehead there, top of the head, that I'm just adding some more of that beautiful blue-green color. So it does really complement the orange and the other gray brownish areas, like the ears and the paws and the feet blend quite well with it. So it's a nice color combination. And so when you're figuring out your colors, you want to remember that there is a very appealing look to picking your colors. So the color wheel really helps, but I'm sure instinctually you'll be able to figure that out too. And so I'm just sort of bringing the blues into different areas, and spend a bit of time just playing with it here. And as long as your paper's wet, then you can keep playing. And this is where I want you to, you know, really let your playful part of you come forward. And we'll be doing a little bit more play when we start to do the flower and the sky behind as well. So at this point, it's just the bunny, and we're just going to spend a little bit more time being a little bit more detailed with the ears and the different sections. So just before we move on to the sky, we want to make sure that everything is as we want it to be with the bunny. So we're going to be placing the flower now with 3 wet brush outward strokes from one point. And this is the start of the flower. It's going to be just sort of where the bunny's nose is, and we're going to spread some colors around very simply. So if you have 3 upward strokes, I'm painting the tops of them now with a really bright yellow and just filling that in. It's quite wet. The paper's wet to start with. We did that first. And just showing you a close-up here of the flower. It's still quite wet, but you can see the shape of the petals are quite straightforward. The shape of your brush. I used a 16, I believe, filled it with water. It's round and a little bit pointy. And then I picked up some really lovely deep orange color, and I'm just going to spread that into the wet paper and the yellow paint and blend them together. And I think it's probably good to start with a lighter color at the top, even if it's a lighter shade, and the bottom of the petals where they meet a little bit darker. And so just playing with that and giving the downward strokes to be like the petals. And then I'm going to start to put some little egg shapes on the grass around the bunny's feet. And this is just with water. And this is where I will just bring in some light colors, just playing with those shapes to bring a nice round egg shape to all three. There's a big one, and there's one behind that one, and then a smaller one. And I'm just going to spend the next couple of minutes playing with those, bringing in a different color eventually. So there's two tones. You don't want to make them too detailed. Just blue at the end and maybe pink in the center, or do some stripes or something like that to make them look like Easter eggs. And then we've got a little bit more work with the flower. So I sort of work between the flower and the eggs because they're both wet and they both need to be manipulated a little bit. And then I'm just marking out where I will put the stem of the flower, just going back and forth and just sort of giving it time in my vision to be able to then draw it on there. And I make this really simple. It's just a stem with a couple of leaves, and I start out really light, and I add 2 or 3 layers to the leaves to make the bottom part of the leaf look darker. And I don't go right to the red flower because the flower is still wet, and the red paint will come into the green stem, and I don't really want that. If anything, I want the green paint to go into the red flower at the bottom, and that will sort of happen as time goes on. And just playing with the eggs again, and just making sure that those shapes look like eggs. They're sitting on the ground, so not completely round like they're floating on the ground. You want them to be a little bit hidden by the grass too that we're going to put, so that's okay. And so now I'm just trying to get that green to go into the bottom of the flower, because I think that really does help a flower look real, is to have a little bit of darkness, a little bit of stem in the bottom. And there I add another darker color of green to the leaves, just giving a little bit more depth to the leaves, a little bit more shadow and shading. And so I play with that for a while just to get that to look how I want it to look. And it looks about the right height. The bunny's nose is right across from the flower. And I'm picking up some color and water now off these eggs. You can see my brush is turning the paper more white. I feel that I need to dry them up a little bit to get some more pigment in there, otherwise they're just going to be a big puddle. When you start to put colors together with too much water, sometimes they just end up turning really muddy looking. So if that happens, just sop up the water with your brush or paper towel. And especially when you're doing this kind of thing, sometimes the colors do merge and they don't have a very nice sort of shade to them. So I'm just spreading out the pink to put some stripes there, and I put some stripes on the little one in the back as well. And you can see where those stripes are holding now. There's not so much water that they're spreading all over the place. So I just kept picking up water and playing with it just to sort of get that place where I can now start to put in the stripes and finish making them look like Easter eggs. So I worked on this for a couple minutes to finish up how I wanted the eggs to look, how I wanted the bunny to look, and I'm just pointing out where I'm going to start putting some water. I'm going to start at the upper left over top of the flower, using my bigger brush, number 16, using the side of it to distribute the water throughout, and sort of touching the flower and the bunny. I'm not going to be too concerned if it starts to run into the sky. I want this to be fun and magical, and I want you to encourage you to do the same, to let those colors bleed. You're not going to let the whole of the red or the whole of the blue go out there. Just showing you the blue. So this is the phthalo blue that I love to use for sky, and just sort of giving it some, you know, a little bit of mottled look. I'm going to be sprinkling some paint on while it's still wet to give it sort of fun. And there's the color there. And this is a color that is a nice purple shade in my palette that came pre-mixed. So it really does add some magic to the sky. And you can spread this around or not, let it dry or not. Add a little bit more blue if you want. What I'm doing is adding some water in between the bunny and the flower to add some more blue to create that consistent blue across all levels, across the background, which I think is important. Even though we're making a magical picture, it's still good to have a little bit of consistency there. And you can really see how the bunny, you know, really fades into that background. So the more complicated your background is, the more you lose focus on your subject. And then I'm just putting some water down around the bunny's feet. We'll be adding some nice lush green and doing some strokes like grass that will come up in front of his feet, in between the eggs, at the base of the flower, and adding in a little bit more depth as we do that. Just putting on that light shade first, and now I'm going with a little bit darker and just using really quick upward strokes to make it look like grass. And one thing about grass, if you do a few strokes together, maybe 3 or 4 in one little patch, and then move over and do another 3 or 4 in different areas in the front, and then moving back. And here's another way that I add texture, is by using a piece of tissue, and it blots up the little puddles of water. So here where I'm talking about where you're just doing a few together, it and just make sure that there's enough there that it does look like there's light as well as dark. So doing, you know, 3 or 4 layers throughout the whole area. Now you can see behind, on the other side of the eggs, there's no grass, it's just plain green, right? And so it just sort of fades into the background. And the blades of grass are at the front of the picture, because that's where you can see more detail. And here I'm just fixing up where I took off too much paint and adding some more blue. So just play with it, let the creativity really flow. And at this point, it should be flowing quite well, because you know, you're playing with it, you're trying to keep that realistic shape. And here I am touching up the paws, and you can even see at this point where the Easter egg is starting to bleed into the grass. And I believe I cleaned that up, because it just didn't make sense to me to have that in there. But and so the realism, you know, is sort of important to me, that it looks still like what I want it to look like. And I think that orange on the right hand side on the grass too didn't appeal to me, so I think I took that out of there. And I mean, it just depends on how you want it to look. And I think actually bringing out some of that blue color, you know, it helps the bunny become a little bit more the center of attention. So just adding more color to the sky. I really like the vibrant colors, and just cleaning up around the flower. Just spending some time making those finishing touches look like the way that I want them. But essentially, this is pretty much complete. I'm adding a little bit more darkness to the eye, just to bring that out a little bit. And as I mentioned, I might add some lashes to that yet. But this is the second bunny I did, and I really do like the third one better, and I quite like it. So this is the second one. The one from last year is at the end of this video, and the one that I like the best is at the beginning. So just filling in a little bit more detail here. And that's pretty much it.